Okay, there we go. We're live. 8 o'clock, the 5th of January, 2021. Dun, dun, dun. New Year. Is that what we're saying at the moment? I think Happy New Year. Happy's been dropped, isn't it? Especially for soft tissue therapists. It's just New Year, New Year. So, New Year, people. My name is Matt Phillips, in case you're joining me for the first time. And this is the Sports Therapy Association podcast, also known as Let's Talk About. And you're joining me, if you are joining me via YouTube, then thanks very much. Please do subscribe, etc., etc. If you're listening to the podcast, then that's fantastic as well. Thank you very much. Do try and leave us a review and a rating on Apple Podcasts in particular. But as always, I encourage you to come join us live at Sports Therapy Association Facebook page, because hopefully, as you'll gather from when you listen to the podcast or watch the YouTube recordings, that it is somewhere where you can get an awful lot from joining us live. It's a great group. You don't have to be a Sports Therapy Association member to watch or join us live. So it's a great way of checking out who we've got here. We have some fantastic people, and it's a great atmosphere just to talk, throw things around, and also we bring you wonderful guests from the soft tissue industry. So if you do join us live, then you get the fantastic possibility of bringing your comments and greetings up on the screen like that. So if you're watching a YouTube video, you can see that. If you're listening to audio on the podcast, you just have to imagine now your face has come up, your Facebook profile, and the message you're sending is up there as well. So, hey, Mark, thanks for joining us. These are people who have chosen to join us live, faithful members and loyal fighters of the group. Becky, how you doing? Good to see you. Happy New Year, everybody. I'm going to say Happy New Year. Obviously, it will depend on your situations, but we are all thinking solutions rather than problems, aren't we? That's my motto. That's what I said as I woke up on January the 1st. Solutions, no problems. Good to see you, Caroline. Good to see you, Julia, Timothy. Oh, how nice seeing all these people. I thought maybe after having a couple of weeks off, you'd have thought, I've got something else better to do, but you don't. Great to see you. Oh, Gary is here. Gary, I thought you'd been on the phone since 7 a.m. Gary won't be joining us on screen tonight, but it seems like he is. Oh, no, it's Jake there, of course. Gary Benson, our founder, has been on the phone pretty much since just after Christmas dinner and hasn't stopped, as you can imagine. But Jake is here. So fantastic. Good to see you, Jake. Catherine, nice to see you. Some fantastic posts coming out from Catherine. Happy Christmas and New Year to you. I feel like I've been joining you at moments. I really like some of the stuff you put out. I've been limiting my social media. But you'll be pleased to know, Catherine, that you are on one of my follow lists because I find the stuff you put out really positive. And as well, nice to see you. How you doing? Happy New Year. Daniel broke his shoulder recently. Sorry to hear that, Daniel. Hope you're on the road to recovery, consistent recovery. I wish you all the best, mate. And Matt Scarsbrook of the Massage Collective is here as well. How are you doing, Matt? Did you shave it off during Christmas? Has it gone? That's normally what happens over a festive holiday, as you drink too much and start listening to your other half. And Mike's here as well. Hey, Mike, how you doing? Good to see you as well. Mike Grice is here. I was talking with you earlier on with our guest for tonight. Right, and people still streaming in. So anyway, just because I'm boring the podcast listeners to death, I'm just encouraging you to come in. It's a great group. We've got 60 people in the house already, which is fantastic for live. It really does warm the cockles of my heart. Let me have a little look what we got here going on. So I've mentioned the podcast, YouTube. Also, I want to mention as well the Christmas special 2 weeks ago. Do have a little listen to that. It's so relative now because we were talking about, obviously, the different measures, how we were going to deal with 2021, particularly in terms of CPD. We had Mike James and Malcolm Sloan in. And although it was obviously we were doing a bit of a quiz, we were wearing hats and it was all kind of trying to lift our spirits up, there was some amazing information coming out, as you can expect from these two guys, not just, but including the soft tissue day and the business boot camp, which is happening on Friday the 8th and Saturday the 9th. Wonderfully cheap price, as is always the case with these guys. I'm biased. Probably people in the room, you've already signed up for it, but a great opportunity over 2 days to listen to, well, Matt's here, for example. I'm sure Matt will put some links in the comments, but listen to some alternative discussion and debate on soft tissue. It's not going to be all fancy new techniques and way to protect your thumbs by using your elbows. That's kind of very 1990s. It's going to be how to change the narrative and your beliefs about what you're doing with soft tissue work and how to make it favor the patient more. rather than just reading out of a book or a qualification you've done. And also, if not more importantly, on the Saturdays, the business boot camp, which I've been kind of trying to promote quite a lot, because it really is going to be useful to people who are finding it tough during COVID-19. There's so many pearls. Even if you listen to the Christmas one, there's so many pearls of wisdom of things you could be putting into practice now to make sure that you're maintaining communication with your clients, that you're setting it up for when you can go back, because we will get over this. We got through Black Death, we got through smallpox, polio. Yes, villages and sometimes cities were wiped out, but we always get through it as a species. So as long as you're not in one of the villages that gets wiped out, you'll be fine. That wasn't a great analogy, was it? But anyway, sign yourself up for the Soft Tissue Day and the Business Bootcamp if you can, just because it will help your business. I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty confident. So yeah, Friday, Saturday on the 8th and 9th. Talking about helping your business, well, we have one of the kings in tonight. I'm very pleased because it's a good example of where you asked for somebody and he was gracious enough to say, yeah, no problem at all. So we have got Walt Fritz coming up. If you've never heard of Walt, then you're in for a treat. I'm particularly excited because being the kind of skeptical, cynical, kind of evidence-based person I have become, I'm always pleased to see one of the pioneers of something which I no longer believe in, who has done a kind of turn as well. Not a turn, but it's just kind of gone through and picked out the stuff which didn't quite make sense and just made it into something more powerful. Because that's the message of what we're always trying to do in Sports Therapy Association as well. Help you be your own therapist, but just become a critical thinker and choose how much weight you give to certain aspects of things you use. You can't always follow the evidence because, as we've seen with the Maslow's Collective, the evidence isn't always there. But you can learn how to be less wrong with your beliefs. Okay, we don't know the answers, but we can be less wrong, which is always a great catchphrase. So Walt really is going to give us a fantastic. I'm setting him a goal here now, but he's going to be super inspiring when it comes to not being afraid to look at what you're doing, even if you've been doing it for 15 years, and just change, just evolve. It sounds so scary, regardless of your experience. But if Walt can do it, anyone can do it. Okay, which we will talk about. So feel free to ask questions and comments. We'll also talk about, I think Walt's coming to the UK courtesy of Mike Grice, which is a fantastic opportunity for you to actually see Walt in person if you like what he says today. Yeah, keep the questions coming. It's so nice to see all of you in here. But for now, I shall bring up the man himself, Mr. Walt Fritz. Let's bring him up and get rid of that. Mr. Fritz, how are you?
Good. Damn, nothing I can say. Matt, just keep going. I'm just going to sit back.
I'm sorry about that, but I generally are really excited. I really am. We've never talked in person before, but I've seen your name come up with things that I've disagreed in back in earlier days, and now I'm just so thrilled that you're a classic example of somebody who, well, like a few great minds. Because even if you're really wrong, like a lot of the time I used to talk about Gil Headley, who had that fantastic video, the Fuzz video. And at the time, fantastic. It was amazing. And then he kind of realized that, yeah, it only really hardens if you're dead, because he was using cadavers and that. But to come up with these ideas so early in the day, there's nothing wrong with that. And I'm going to talk later on about how I think personally you're a bit hard on yourself. I think you're too hard on yourself, but we'll come up with that later on. But hey, thanks so much, first of all, for joining us.
Glad to be here and glad to see some familiar names on that the chat board there. So
they're all in for you, mate. They're all in there. We've got some very influential people in there. Look at them. Matt Scarsbook and Mike Grice just waiting with questions. Right. Okay. So where are you? Just remind me where you're talking from today.
I'm in New York State, Rochester, New York, about 5 hours outside of New York City.
Fantastic. Okay. So thanks for doing that. So what time have you got there now?
It's a little after 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Fine. Okay. So we're just after 8 o'clock here. So thanks for that. So for people who haven't come across your courses, I know in this room there's quite a few who have, because they're the ones who said, get Walt, get Walt. But for people listening to the podcast who may not be familiar with you, give us a little background. You've been in the business for quite a long time. Let's go back to the beginning. What are we, 15, 20 years?
A little bit more than that. Yeah. I think I'm on year 35 as a physical therapist. Physical therapy, when I graduated, was a bachelor's profession. There wasn't even a master's, much less a doctoral profession. And, I think that the profession pretty much went in line with that. Evidence-based practice had yet to kick in the United States. And while we certainly saw the value of evidence and the, a good mechanism of action story, there wasn't the mandate like there is now. So I kind of grew up in this whole time, allowing a lot of kind of bullshit narratives to come and be absorbed by me, and without a lot of critical thinking skills. I wasn't taught that in school, or maybe I missed that class, critical thinking. My first 5 years were spent in a lot of different domains in physical therapy: early intervention, pediatrics, developmental disabilities, general hospital, home care. But somewhere in the very early 90s, I started in on some myofascial release training, like a lot of people do. And I got hooked. I got hooked big time. I dropped down that silo of myofascial release, and I didn't pick my head out of there for a good 15 years. It was a good story. It was a compelling narrative. I saw patients getting better, and I believed what I was taught. I believed the reason why. I believe the secret science story. I believe the emotional attachment of emotions getting stuck in the fascia, which today, I'm really freaking embarrassed to say some of the stuff that I used to believe, and worse, that I used to tell my patients. But you know what? It's where we are. It's where I was back then. And I was really invested in that narrative of myofascial release to the point where I kind of closed my eyes and ears to anybody else. And I worked that way for a long time. And then back in the mid 2000s, I got roped into that Soma Simple debate, which a lot of people have read. And it's probably that Soma Simple great conversation, myofascial release, great conversation, is both one of my more embarrassing moments in my professional life, as well as one of my proudest moments, because it represents a transition point from who I was and what I believed in and what I was willing to fight for, even though I had no credible evidence to support it other than telling people they just needed to experience it, right? And to go from that and in the period of a couple of years to really being able to see some of the flaws in my logic, some of the flaws in how I was taught the work, just a whole lot of real painful awarenesses. And you know what? I'm still learning. I'm still really comfortable with saying, I don't know. And I say it every day. And I think the more I say it, the more people understand that the more you know, often the more you don't know, right? You know enough to know that you don't know it all. Whereas before, I thought I knew everything. It was all about the fascia, and nobody else knew it because they didn't study under the guy that I studied, blah, 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 right? It was heady stuff, but it was probably pretty wrong. Like you said before, we try and be less wrong. We can never be right, but let's try and be less wrong every day. And that's kind of what I'm doing now.
Again, I don't think you should be embarrassed. Soma Simple, for people who haven't, let's bring it up.
Wait a minute. You really read that? Did you really read the stuff that I said?
Yeah. I know, but to be up there, you were discussing with some fantastic great minds, and you were kind of holding your own, and then you came out the other end. If we just, let me put that on full screen here. I haven't got the whole thing, but it was a massive, it's still up there. In fact, it's been converted into easy read PDFs. I don't know when's the last time you went in there, but it's a fantastic example. If you were still sticking to your guns and still saying exactly the same thing, then you wouldn't be on here for start, but I wouldn't be kind of like highlighting it. But for anyone who's interested in seeing how not to argue, Soma Simple is always great. And I'm a fan of it because names like Craig Payne, from the running background, Craig Payne and Blaise Dubois, always going for it, Ian Griffiths and Kevin Kirby, the podiatrists and the anti kind of barefoot runners. It's just a battleground on there. And Mick Thacker and the minds on there are huge. Okay, you've got Diane Jacobs, who I think you can't see on here, but her kind of tagline is primate, social groomer, neuroelastician. And you yourself are up there as a questioning mesodermalist or something. It's not for the easy. It is quite heavy stuff. But the fact you are on there and conversing with these people, I think, and you've come out, I think it's a credit to you, but that's because I'm just biased. But it's a great read for people who want to learn how to be critical thinkers, because you can see where some of the fallacies are. You can see where maybe you make mistakes in your own arguments. And there's some great minds on there. And I'm sticking Walt as one of the great minds on there, even though he's often on the butt of the other great minds. No, it's a credit to you, Walt, I think, and I don't think you should be ashamed of what's up there at all.
Yeah, the one thing that I wished was that they would tack on a little postscript to that, because at some point a year or two later, we came back with a couple other conversations that kind of, well, first of all, I got a chance to apologize to all the people that I insulted on that thread, because I got kicked off that thread, I don't know, 5 or 6 times, kicked off Soma Simple for bad behavior, and then let back on for promises of good behavior that I could just never keep. And there was just a lot of bad blood. So when I came back, and it sort of set things straight. And I haven't been on there much at all in the last couple of years, but it sounds like it might be worth going back to with some of the names that you just. So
it's you have to be able to hold your own to be on there, and I think it's healthy. I've learned so much from reading polar arguments, and still today I purposely follow polar people who are going too far one way or the other, because you get to see the mistakes in both camps. Yeah. It's quite helpful.
And I know Diane was really one of the people who, if you will, held my hand as they call it, crossing the chasm. From that tissue-based perspective to a more neurocentric perspective. And Diane was, I give her a lot of kudos and gratitude for being patient with me, because it took a long time for me to unlearn what I thought I knew and to start fresh in all this. So I have a lot of gratitude for Diane and a lot of other folks on Soma Simple and off of Soma Simple. And you know what? I'm learning things on social media every day too, like the rest of us. And sometimes it's just reading the way somebody pieces together an argument. And it's just, I marvel at the way people can come to places of critical thinking like that. And you know what? That's where I'm at now. I'm 61 and I'm finally starting to think critically, right?
Matt Scarsbrook, who's very eloquent with his words, he's part of the Matt. It's quite exciting in the UK at the moment, because not just the Massage Collective, but they're doing a great job kind of representing a movement now where, because manual therapy and touch has been shown to have, for example, the research is there with regards to decreasing anxiety and depression. It has an effect on the nervous system. There's no doubt about that beneficial effect. And so this is kind of idea, if we know it does that, that's where we have to kind of take it from. That's what we have to work with, what we know it does. This is what one of the things you do. But Matt Scarsbrook is part of this collective him together with Anne-Marie and Becky Morton are kind of doing this and working really well with physios and other disciplines who, if you're a massage therapist and you're on the same page as, for example, yourself, then it's amazing how other disciplines are suddenly ready to listen and talk and work with you, because everyone's kind of then sitting on the same page. But Matt said here, for people listening to the podcast, Matt Scarsbrook has said it's more powerful to hear someone like Walt make comments about how he's moved on from previously held beliefs that will ever be from someone who might never had to change their mind. Huge respect. There you go.
Thank you. Yeah. And again, moving from 10 years ago, when it was to me about moving from the tissue-based perspective to a neurocentric perspective, over the past 5 years, I've kind of integrated even more into the behavioral sciences aspect to it, the concept of shared decision-making, which, in the physio profession in the United States, I know I've got some literature on it that talks about it, but it's not as well represented as in some of the other medical and health professions, at least here in the States in the journals. But I think shared decision making and in sharing the power relationship in the therapeutic dynamic are undervalued aspects of our education, our continuing education training, and the way we see ourselves. I mean, we're basically built up to be experts. We take more training, we take more continuing ed, we have experience, and we become these experts, whether it's soft tissue experts or manual therapy, experts or exercise. And I think that does a number up here to us, to the point where we start thinking more about, using our own reasoning process to figure out what's wrong with somebody and what we should do about it, without including our patient, our client in more. Evidence-based model, to me, is an equal representation of the evidence, the clinician's perspective, but also patient perspectives and values. And I know I kind of go head to head with some exercise-based physios on social media about this, that don't feel like patient perspectives and values should be allowed to do whatever they want to, right? It should be still well steeped in the evidence, but there's got to be more of a discussion going on versus us telling them what the best evidence is and what's best for them. That's where I think that we still have work to do, whether it's a physio profession or massage profession or whatever direction we're coming into this from. And that's kind of where I'm headed with a lot of the research that I'm doing right now is more on shared decision making and coming up with a more blended model of when we touch. We think you guys are soft tissue. That's what you're calling yourself, right? But when we touch somebody, what are we really touching, right? We're touching their skin, their nervous system, their perceptions, their fears, their hopes, their contextual factor. There's so many things at play other than what we think we're doing to the soft tissue. And that's really the drum that I've been beating for the last 5 or 10 years is, we're working with a fully functional human being and not just their nervous system, not just their fascia, not just their muscle, but a lot of other things beyond that. And that's why I think the partnership aspect of this work is so crucial, whether it's about the kind of work that I do, which is more MFR style, that I don't call it that anymore, whether it's traditional massage with where it's a wet work, or even whether it's exercise-based work, with including the patient in the decision-making process to a greater extent than I think a lot of us are comfortable with. And boy, it's tough to move out of that comfort zone.
I want to take a step back to, I've got to imagine that somebody's joining this who maybe is, because in England and the UK, myofascial release is still a pretty big thing. There's still, and for a lot of people, if you want to do what we call level 5 and become an advanced soft tissue therapist, then the go-to thing is, right, let's really have focus in on myofascial release because it's a new technique which you have to save for like later on and pay some money for it. But what were some of the, when you said you started critically analyzing your beliefs, what were some of the things about traditional myofascial release which made you suddenly think, rather than someone saying that's wrong, that made you have some coins dropping and start thinking, hold on, that doesn't really make much sense?
Yeah. I think one of the most simple things is something that Diane Jacobs easily taught me. All the things that you and I and everybody else who's listening or watching, the things that we think we're impacting directly, right? Whether it's the muscle, whether it's the fascia, whether it's the sublux, vertebrae, whatever that is, can we ever have certainty that we can singularly select that tissue for evaluation as well as intervention to the exclusion of everything else? And if you can really be honest with yourself, can you do that, right? Can you target one single tissue? And when I stood back and really looked at what I had been taught and what I was teaching at the time, I realized that it's really impossible to do that, that there's so much else attached. And whether it's a tissue-based attachment of the skin and everything else, or whether it's a nervous system-based attachment, right? Or whether it's a perception and behavioral-based attachment to the thought, that was one of the biggest things that I had to sort of unlearn, that when I feel something in somebody, so to speak, quote unquote, right? That thing that I feel that I used to thought was their fascial restriction, it may have nothing to do with their connective tissue. It may be something that never changes, even though we delude ourselves in thinking that we're going to change it. And I think in some ways we actually think we feel changes because we want to please ourselves as well as our patients, right? So there was a lot of unlearning of that MFR perspective, as well as the whole nother rabbit hole of emotions getting tied into the fascia that, I bought it like a big old bass with a hook in its mouth. And, it all made sense in that closed silo, that the closed doors of a conference room, when somebody's got you by the shirt and somebody who tells us a compelling story, myself included, we can really influence people. And if we don't keep our perspective and allow ourselves to think critically, it's easy to get dragged into that rabbit hole and really never come out except for your feet dangling. And I like to use the story. It took me a long time before I stuck my head out of the rabbit hole and took a look around at what all the other therapists were doing, what all the other rabbits were doing. And somebody might be doing something, which as I looked from across the room, that resembled the slow, static, dry work that I was doing as MFR, right? But what was coming out of their mouth was totally different. And how they were explaining the work to their patient was totally different. That really, it made me really step back and start questioning what it was that I was doing and what it was that I was teaching to others, right?
Fantastic. Yeah. What about, what was your journey with understanding pain? Like when you were kind of deep into your MFR and stuff, were you listening to kind of like Mosley or reading kind of Butler and stuff? Or was that just,
no,
did that help your transition or?
Initially, no, it was too much all at once, right?
Mm.
I needed somebody to spoon feed me, like little baby step type things, because I had so locked myself into, and it was about me, not anybody else. I locked myself into that room where it's all about the fascia. It took me a long time to come out of that room and be able to absorb anything else. So the whole concept of pain being a construct of the brain, you know, I didn't buy that for a long time, because it was pain because the fascia was tight or the fascia was damaged, right? Or the fascia was scarred down, and trying to step back from that. And, I'm a slow learner I really am a slow learner when it comes to those things. And it took me a long time. And whether it was physical conversations with people like the folks on Soma Simple, or reading, or just trying out some of these models on my own, and understanding that, the fascia story, it was a useful metaphor, but that's all it was, right?
Mm-hmm.
And once I stepped back from the metaphor and started looking at the pain science that was out there, the tissue science, the brain science, the all the different thing that's available to us, that, I learned it in school and I allowed myself to forget it. That's when some of Mosley and et cetera, some of those pain models started to make sense for me.
I think it's really interesting to understand for educators and for therapists themselves that we're not all going to take the same path to kind of like current realignment, or kind of like, it's not a case of read this and you will be on the right page. It's all finding the right person or the right medium of, and relating it to your own life, isn't it? No one can force the information on anyone. It's taken you a long time to get around. So I try and remember that. I mean, I personally don't like, I used to use the word like myths and misconceptions, and I'm English, obviously I don't swear, but I put down a lot of the traditional narratives and kind of called it twaddle, and I was posting things on social media and calling people out. And I realized that a lot of the time that doesn't get the job done. It's not, you don't educate anybody by doing that. You have to be a bit cleverer, don't you? So what are your go-to ones on courses? I'm interested because, so you've turned this around and obviously you've changed your courses, and now you've got some for a while now, you've had very successful courses. Do you still get people coming onto your courses who are filled with stuff that you realize you've got to kind of empty a little bit, or is everybody kind of a clean slate because they already know you?
Oh, no, it kind of ranges the continuum from people who are really deeply embedded into a tissue-based model. And, they need the CE credits or whatever, and that's why they're at my class, to people who either are new graduates, or I have this whole other niche of people that I teach to. I teach as speech therapist, speech language pathologist. I teach manual therapy for voice and swallowing disorders, and they're not schooled at all in manual therapy at all, soft tissue work. And it's like, I really enjoy working with them, because you know what, they don't have habits to break. They have fears to break because they're not taught to touch in this way, but you don't have to unlearn a lot. But for the most part, I'm sure there's people who take one of my trainings and say, that's a bunch of crap because he didn't talk enough about fascia. And I still get that as a critique on the eval forms, even though I think I'm pretty transparent where this is not about fascia at all. But, it's being an educator, you have to try and reach as many people as you can and realize you can't reach everybody.
It's interesting. I very much want to kind of hear, one of my passions is trying to learn like ways to getting through to different people. You're going to have so many tools and ways depending on the person in front of you, because there's so much. Normally it's anger. We've had quite a few members actually. I mean, I like to think the STA has played a role, and I know it has in a few cases where first people have kind of reacted quite violently to kind of us dismissing maybe something, or try not to dismiss it. But when people finally come around, they're the most open, fantastic therapists possible, because they start just seeing the light, kind of thing. Yeah. But what are you must have some interesting stories where maybe not in one day or one course, maybe it's taken a couple, where you've actually helped a therapist suddenly go through what you did, where they've gone, oh, I get it, which means, right. How have you got any kind of anecdotes of how you enlisted that response?
No specific stories per se, but I think probably the one that, let me speak for myself. The one that I found most useful was that one about looking around the room of other people and how they work, right? And sure, some people are moving with massage, some people are staying static work, and they're doing subtly different things. But when you really look around the room at 30 people working from all these different intervention strategies, et cetera, it's like, are we all doing that everything so differently, right? What about the overlap? with all of those with all those modalities or intervention styles, right? And I think that's what really I love to turn that light on for people, is realize, you know what, you can still hold on to that trigger point story or whatever it is you do, right? Or at least the style of intervention, because I've held on to the style of intervention of myofascial release because I've been doing it since 1992. It's my native tongue, right? I never get, any lotion out and do wet work or anything like that, because it's just not natural to me. But I figure out a way, just like you'll figure out a way, no matter what style of intervention you're doing, to make all of this work. And I think I just wandered well away from your original question. I apologize about that.
Okay.
But it is my habit. To me, that's probably the most engaging type of story that I have with somebody. Somebody really comes in locked into, you know what, I want to learn what you have to share about shared decision making or patient-centered models, but I still feel it's all about that trigger point. And hopefully if they at least leave that workshop having a little kernel of questioning, right? A little bit of doubt, because to me, that's all it took, was some doubt to get this ball rolling. And you know what? It's still rolling, and I'm still unlearning things that I thought were correct, even though once I crossed that chasm, we're still learning new work all the time. And the thing that I believe too, and as soft tissue therapists, as sports therapists, you are, I'm sure, and again, I don't want to speak for your profession or your membership, you're embracing movement, exercise, as a part of the work that we do in addition to the soft tissue work. And I am by no means just get them on the table and then get them off and we're done about the magic what we do with our hands, because I think that is very disempowering, creative passivity in the part of the patient, right? My goal is to help you move with less fear, with less pain, with less difficulty. And I incorporate a lot of movement strategies in my intervention. I'm not a classic, okay, we're going to do repetitions of strengthening. That's not my intervention style, but it's certainly part of the therapeutic dynamic that I go through with every patient, nearly every session. It's a manual therapy-based way to get people moving again.
Fantastic. Right, we've got some questions coming in. Okay. I'm going to forget the two or three I've got in my head because it's about them, not really about me. But I could ask you questions the rest of the evening. But we've got first of all, let's have a little look. So Carolyn here has just mentioned, myofascial release is huge in level 5. That was 12 months ago. I'm pretty sure it is. I think it's still one of the most sought after. Oh wow, let's get into.
If I could just interject, one of the problems is when you take a training like MFR, they present you with this mountain of quote unquote evidence to think that it really does have importance. And to me, the importance is the relationship that we create with our patient, not the secular and singular things we think we're doing to their fascia. And sure, the Fascial Congress and all those research bodies have come up with some interesting fascial research. But I'm still waiting for that study that says we can select fascia for intervention to the exclusion of everything else. And I've not seen that one yet. And I think that's where, whether it's MFR or trigger point work or any kind of muscle-based work, right? You got to realize you're treating the human being, and all these modalities, they're more metaphoric, inroads into treating the human being than they are truly a way to connect with their fascia.
Agreed. What he said, definitely. Anna Maria, who's another part, who's 1/3 of the massage collective I was mentioning with Matt, she earlier on commented, yes, beautifully said. You have to imagine this is an Italian accent. Soft tissue work to be seen under the lens of interaction instead of only intervention. We need to measure it as a communication tool instead of just a mechanism of effects. Nicely said. Bravo. Buonissimo. Matt Scarsford's back. He's got a question. Let's start with a question then from Matt. Here we go. Let's bring it on. So for the people who are listening to the podcast, I will read it out for you. A question, given Walt's reference to the classroom scenario where he got caught up in the beliefs around MFR, emotions, etc., that's a situation that is very much still occurring today. Students being taught by gurus and not being encouraged to question. So does Walt have any ideas for how the education environment or process could be changed to increase critical thinking and reduce guruism?
Oh, I have lots of them, and probably most of them I'm not going to share here because I don't want to get myself sued.
It's England. We don't sue in England. You're fine.
Yeah, but this goes out in the United States too.
It's true.
A lot of anyway. It has to come from, if there's a governing body, they have to do a better job. In the United States, the governing bodies don't do a good enough job. You can get continuing education approval for some pretty crap courses, and people do it all the time. Now, who am I to call somebody else's work crap? Well, it's my opinion, right? But trying to hold the educational entities, myself included, to a higher standard is one of them. And, we're swinging at windmills here. It's how do you do that? I think it really has to start in our education process, in teaching critical thought. Now, how do you balance teaching critical thinking with then being required to take a course on myofascial release, right? That's a hard one. As long as you've got the guru or the guru's disciples coming in to teach that course to people, you're going to get that same attempt to shove them down a rabbit hole. It's not easy. And, I don't have an answer for it, except, you know what? Keep beating on people. You said earlier, Matt, that, earlier on, you were definitely more hard on people, coming down on people's bad beliefs and et cetera. And I kind of took that role early on too. And I've softened a bit, although sometimes I still like to take a big old swing at people in terms of, why are you teaching people that? Why are you teaching people that things that just have not been shown to be true? And I was trained in my MFR to say, well, science will catch up with us. We're doing the good work now. And it's like, you know what? You've got to be better than that. You've got to be able to come up with some evidence and a mechanism of action that is credible by people outside your own rabbit hole, or you're teaching crap to people. How do you break that? Don't know. Wish I had the answer to that.
I think one of the messages we've had here from various guests and talking with each other is that it's, like you say, I love the expression swinging at windmills. It's like, what's the point? It's a great analogy. But yeah, we're not going to change the education establishments quickly. But I think as therapists, we can change each of us, and then together we can have probably a quicker, more of an effect on younger people looking to do what courses and looking for advice. Because with just a few little gems, you can turn a lot of what people think is a very good advert and bit of marketing. If people just critically have a little look and know what to look at for some of the fallacies, then that what looks initially like a fantastic clickbait turns into just, well, that looks like a pile of crap, doesn't it? Yeah. I think it's giving people just those few little skills to spot rubbish, like when a research paper means nothing, how to tell from a little study whether that's backed up or not, or whether they're just making something which isn't true.
And also, I think a tremendous way is to leap over that and have that one-on-one interaction with a patient and let them know that, some of and I'm really delicate with this, how I take a patient who's come from somebody who told them, they've got the worst trigger points ever invented by God, or that their core is weak and that's why they're having all this problem. It's like, it's about holding their hand as you come to an understanding that, well, those might be nice stories. They might not actually be the whole picture here. And I think sometimes it's taking the message right to the consumer, and because then you have the chance for that pebble to drop in the pond and those ripples to spread. I may never change. I'm never going to change the narrative of somebody who really believes it's all about the fascia or the trigger point or whatever, or maybe I can. But if I can have some time with a patient and talk about the richness of what really creates pain and what really creates change, I think I'm probably, spending my energy in a wiser way.
Good stuff. Keep the questions coming, people. This is your chance now. I promise you I'm going to shut up, because it's a great opportunity for you to ask questions about any battles you might be having, any problems you've got, to get kind of across a way of thinking, or with other therapists, or defending yourself on social media and stuff.
While you're looking at that question, I just want to tell people I'm going to be posting something that will link to the video, a page on my blog where I'm going to put some research papers that really talk to a lot of the background that made me where I'm at today. The multifactorial aspect of manual therapy's impacts beyond the tissue. Papers by Joel Bialowski and by a Italian researcher by the last name of Jerry. There's a paper by a researcher by the name of Kolb about 30 years of understanding a multifactorial effect of manual therapy, but people are still teaching singular tissue approaches. It's like it's time that we start growing up, people, really, just to understand that there's more to it than what the gurus that want to teach us. Okay, so I'm going to be linking a lot of that from my blog page.
That'd be great. Yeah, we'll make sure those links go in the comments so people can come back here and refer other people to here, because we like to try and make sure that every episode remains live. It's got more of a shelf life. So if people are talking about MFR, bam, this will be the feed to kind of put links in and send people to.
Yeah.
Well, what else we got here? Chris Kitson is in the house. Let's have a look. Chris normally speaks great stuff. The conceptual switch can be pretty rough, exclamation mark. It absolutely threw me into a spin and took time to regain confidence in what I was doing whilst changing my narrative. Chris was on the show recently. He decided he didn't want to be an osteopath. He's an ex-osteopath. So he came away from that regulation because he thought it wasn't helping him as a therapist. It was confining him. He was paying money for something which he just didn't really like anymore. So that was really interesting to hear from Chris.
I think when you're transitioning to a new narrative, everything gets clunky. And I don't care whether it's with what we do for a living or something bigger in life. It takes you a while to get that elevator speech going, right? And we all start with the elevator speech. And once you get the 30-second elevator speech, you can move on to the 2-minute one, to the 5-minute one. And evidently, the elevator speech becomes more than something you memorize. It becomes what you really feel and how you view it. You know what? I had to learn those little chunky elevator speeches in the beginning of all this, the pain science, the behavioral science, et cetera, until I really understood it more. So it's never easy.
Leslie here has obviously done some work with you, says Walt. Gave me so much more confidence to be still with a client, still hands, quietly ask them what feels right, and loads of confidence around the anterior neck, which has transferred so beautifully into treatments. Well, there we go. If you do want to leave a testimonial on Walt's website, Leslie, then I'm sure you should get in contact with him. It's a lovely piece.
Yeah, Leslie was at my class last year, I think up in Dundee, where we did the voice and swallowing class I teach. And there's a lot of pretty nuanced work up in this area that, you know what, you don't want to just be hammering on the patient and they're sitting there quietly taking what they hope you know to be fact, right? That's where the need to have a true therapeutic partnership is so important, and elevating their perspective to a place of equality with what you have to say. I let them know that I know a lot, but I don't know what you're feeling until you tell me, until I ask you, and I need you to participate. And I think that's probably one of the hallmarks of the way I teach and treat, is that my patient is playing an active role throughout the whole course of the treatment. They're not just laying on my table, just sort of receiving or whatever that might be. I'm a lot of work for people, and sometimes I'm too much work and they fire me and they go to somebody who'll do what they think is best for the patient. But you know what? I'd rather lose that patient rather than put them at a risk. Okay, so that's why I just demand a partnership.
There's an interesting question here. When you see my eyes moving, it's not because I'm ignoring, I'm just keeping an eye on the comments. Well, you can see the comments as well if there's something there you want to pick up, and then let me know.
Yeah.
Adagio Hands here. Great name. Actually, his name's Zoltan. But Adagio Hands says, oh, it's disappeared now. This is something I was going to ask you earlier on, the slippery slope to realizing that maybe you have to throw everything out. He says, for people listening to the audio, great discussion. If we rigorously applied evidence-based and critical thinking to all complementary therapies, brackets, Reiki, crystal healing, aromatherapy, even acupuncture, would we not then end up dismissing all of them? Yet some people seem to find them helpful. Thank you, Zoltan. Mm-hmm. Have you found that you've managed to draw a line, or for me, it's tricky. If I kind of apply some critical thinking to most of, I don't want to say the word passive, because I know I read something you wrote about passive, but kind of things you do to people.
With people.
Would you entertain dry needling, or would you have a discussion with someone saying, what are you doing?
I missed the first part of the question about dry needling, but what I try and I interrupted you. Instead of things that I do to people, I try to make it feel like I'm doing it with them, right? You know, there's a lot of people out there, a lot of clinicians out there in the physio community and the pain community in general, who feel like manual therapy is still too passive. It's a low value intervention that unless you're exercising, you're wasting money and you're not being evidence-based. But yet there's evidence to support the manual intervention, not just the tissue-based, but the outcomes. The outcomes are there, and especially if the patient's coming into me with a predisposition to having a bias toward manual therapies, right? If I say no to them, right, and no, I'm going to force my narrative on you, I'm not listening to them. Sure, I could say, I'm not the guy for you. You need to go somebody else. I turn people away if they're looking for strictly an exercise-based approach. But we do exercise. We just blend it in a different way, and we use manual therapy as our approach tool. Okay, but the goal is still the same as an exercise-based therapist. And I just feel like we're all guilty, or we can be guilty, of ignoring patient preferences and values too much. What do you do about, if Reiki is your modality? I don't know. Can you figure out a way to combine that with some evidence-based approach, not by holding your hand out in the air unless you're doing behavioral therapy, right? But I don't want to undercut anybody's belief in Reiki or crystal healing or anything like that, but yet I put it on par with a lot of what I used to believe about myofascial release and the energy body. And if I don't get to the person's emotional holding pattern, then they'll never truly heal. I still do what I've done for 30 years now with my hands. It's just I'm thinking different things, and I'm talking about different things. I don't know if you can quite stretch it that far as Reiki, but I think you can take a lot of modalities, intervention styles that have been sort of shown to be a little bit outdated from the model that it's presented, but you can still do that hands-on work as long as you sort of update the narrative that you explain things with.
Good answer. And I think there is a danger of people who maybe listen and don't listen to everything. They just kind of read the abstract sort of thing of dismissing everything now. There was even something going around in the UK for a little bit, gained a little bit of traction of, oh, there's no point studying anatomy anymore. What's the point of learning origins and insertions? And
Right.
And they were like, because it's all to do with the nervous system now. And then that kind of got some backlash of, hold on, whoa. Surely you don't have to start going all that way, or, it's.
And, anatomical, physiological training, it's a part of my background as a physical therapist, right? It's a part of most of our background. It is interesting. I wrote a paper called Anatomy Matters, but which anatomy, right? Because if you're a fascial therapist, it's about fascial anatomy. If you're a muscle therapist, it's about muscle anatomy, right? Anatomy matters, but it's the human anatomy that matters. And somehow we've lost that. We've gotten into this, we're so, what is the forest for the trees statement, right? We're so stuck in that, close to that tree, that we see everything as the tree instead of the forest of the human being. And yeah, we shouldn't get rid of anatomy training or physiology training, or maybe even fascial training, right? As long as it's done in the context of the human being, and not as a single source of problem or solution.
Very good. A question here from Keone, I think that's pronunciation, forgive me if it's not, Keone Parker. I am a third-year sports therapy and rehabilitation student. What advice would you give in order to develop my critical thinking? Great stuff so far, very interesting.
Some of it comes in the form of questioning authority, right? So I'm going to put myself in a place right now when I've taken different courses and somebody starts telling you all these stories. It takes a lot of courage to really challenge them, and it may not be appropriate, right? If you're in school to be challenging your professors or whoever that might be, but realize as you're hearing a story, it's a tunnel vision story, right? There's a lot of tunnel vision stories, and can you come up with a way to combine those stories and realize each of those stories may not be accurate, but they're all giving us a path to help this person, okay? What tools can you, to develop your critical thinking, move beyond what you're learning in your program right now, and you may not have time for that, but look into behavioral sciences. Look into, if you're a manual therapist, look into the exercise-based perspectives. You may not agree with it all, or it might really conflict with you. It did with me, until I realized that maybe we're speaking just similar languages, but trying to say the same, or different languages just to say the same thing. Right now, I'm doing a lot of work with that multifactorial concept of manual therapy being the tissues instead of the problem, having be the signaler to the brain, to the central nervous system, to your autonomics. And it's a hard one. That's probably one of the hardest switches, to move from the tissue being the problem to the tissue being a signaler to higher centers. And, just thinking from that perspective is going to either really frustrate you because you have to unlearn what you learn, or it's going to excite you because it opens up new doors. I'm going to post some papers on that blog link that has some of those references as well.
Fantastic. That would be a great resource. I like something I read the other day where you were talking about the fantastic question, which a lot of therapists still don't ask, and it's such a great question. I want you to elaborate on it, but where you actually turn around and during your subjective and say to the patient, what do you think is the problem? Why is that such a great question for maybe a therapist who hasn't even considered that before?
Because I think so many of my patients, when they come and sit across the table from me, have maybe been belittled for when they gave their opinion, right? Or maybe laughed at by a clinician when they said what they think the problem is, right? We've all been there. We've all been either whether the person made us feel less than or we allowed ourselves to feel less than, right? That I don't know anything, that's why I'm here to see you. And what I try to do is to bring parity to that relationship. I know a lot of stuff, but I don't know your story. I don't know what went into you being here sitting in front of you. And that's why I like to we have the interview, and the interview isn't rushed. It goes on for as long as they want it to. And I will eventually ask them, well, what do you think is going on? What do you think is the problem? What do you think we should do? What's your expectation out of today's session? If you're a massage therapist and they come to see you, have you ever asked that patient, what's your expectation for today? Because you expect they came for a massage. But I've had patients, and I'm a manual therapist. Let's just put it like right out there, right? That's not what they're looking for. I've had patients say to me, what I really want today is just a different understanding of why I might be continuing to have that problem. I may not touch them the entire session physically, right? But I think I touch them by listening to them and asking their opinion on things.
That's beautiful. I can hear Anna Maria clapping at that already. I touch them, maybe not physically, but by listening to them. That's great. Oof, that's the one we're gonna. Very cool. Other questions coming in, people. It is now getting to 8:53. So if you've got anything else that you'd like to ask Walt, then feel free to do so. I just want to bring up Walt, your current web page. Let's bring that up here. So this is your website. You mentioned already there's a blog going on there. What other things can people find when they're on their website? I'm going to put it on the full screen, but we can still hear you.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I carry a fairly robust list of resources and evidence. I already mentioned earlier my attention, my interest, my spark has drifted into that voice and swallowing disorders. So there's a lot more papers that might apply more to a speech pathology population with voice and swallowing, dysphagia globus, stuff like that. But there's a lot of more general references. I'm going to put some of these up on the blog as well for what's really transformed me from being a fascialist to a skin believer to now being a person who tries to treat the human being. Okay, lots of those references. I have some, like everybody else. I've got some online courses now with COVID, making me not travel as much. I've yet to upload an online course more for the general PT and massage population. It's more of that voice and swallowing, although it's really appropriate. My approach is really, sure, it's about this static type of work that I do, but it's really about having a more equal dynamic with my patient. And that's what I teach in all my online courses. That's what I teach in all my live classes. Well, I don't know. What else do I have on my website there? There's there's other stuff there. Go poke around. I have some self-treatment handouts, et cetera, things there. I can get a look at it myself.
I noticed you still call it the Myofascial Release blog. Is that to try to entice? Is that clickbait?
Oh my gosh! You know what? Matt, thank you very much. I gave up tending my website about 2 years ago, and thank you for that. That needs fixing immediately.
Or not. Maybe it's to get people in there. It's like you've got to give the people what they want. That's what you said.
I had done a full purge. Thought I had done a full purge, but it's what, there it is right out on the homepage, and boy, oh boy, I got some. Okay, why am I so adamant about not having myofascial release on it? A lot of it is the past association. A lot of it is moving into this concept of manual therapy, which is, I think, a more general and an honest representation of the work that I do. But then I get people coming in from the more physio, osteo, chiropractic perspective that view manual therapy as, Anna, are you nodding because you're sleeping, or nodding?
No, she's nodding in Italian.
Manual therapy to a lot of people means joint manipulation, joint mobilization. And to me, manual therapy is it's any kind of touch-based intervention. So anyway, thanks for pointing that out, Matt, because boy, oh boy.
Oh no, I was commending you. I thought it was clever. I didn't realize it was a mistake.
It's just sloppiness.
Actually, before I forget, just in case people didn't quite get that, it's the website is Walt Fritz Seminars, all one word, waltfritzseminars.com. But again, we'll put a link to that in the podcast and also in the comments here. Right then, well, look, it's I think this is going to be. I'd really like, if I don't want to put on the spot now, you haven't got to say anything, but I'm very interested in the work you do with speech and around that area. Maybe at another point, if people show some interest, which I'm sure they will, maybe more time to devote to that. It's an area I've never considered, but I think also, like you've said, you've mentioned a few times, it's a great area to show some of the stuff you've learned, because it is an area where you don't want to start hammering away, and where people are more connected to. I think it'd be really interesting to hear some of your ideas come out linked to that. So maybe another day.
Yeah, I'd love to come back.
That'd be really cool. Just a few comments here from people. What do we got? Nicholas Smith says, I think a lot of clients are relieved to have someone listen to them and taking their problems, pain seriously. This is something we're trying to kind of show. You're perfectly right, Nicola. Definitely. That's a great comment. During COVID-19, a lot of therapists in the UK, I don't know if it's the same as in the States, but if all you got is your magic hands, that leaves you nothing when you're not allowed to see your patient. But we're realizing now that once you get over that idea that this is where your ability is, and actually it's here, and these two little things on the side of your head and a little bit out of the mouth, you can still have a business and work with many of your clients by doing the whole virtual thing, and use that empathy and understanding and to such a great extent, even though it's over computer when you have to. It's something that, what's it like in the States at the moment, briefly? Are you finding that there's still a lot of people who can't work and because they're missing the point?
Yeah, physios have been considered essential workers from day one. But there's a broad umbrella of physios, from acute care, hospital-based, to more outpatient, which is where I am. So I was pretty non-existent as a clinician for most of the early part of last year, and then things got a bit safer here in the United States, and I reopened, and we're not in the full shutdown like you are. Not that our I think our issues are probably similar. Our issues lie more with the political problems up at the top that won't allow us to shut down, or at least, come what may, you have leaders that at least support that. Okay, I got off on a political tangent. I just had to say that, okay? Things are still tough here. A lot of people, even though they might be in need or benefit from all of our services, they're choosing not to go out there. Telehealth is an option. I've done a tiny bit of it. I've done more telehealth or teleconferencing like we're doing here than I have one-on-one with patients. Finding ways to keep busy.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Walt. I did say an hour, and that's the hour. I know you got patients lined up this afternoon, so thank you so much for giving us your time. Like we said before, I'm not sure if Mike is still in here, but you're planning, all things well, to come to Birmingham, are you, at some point?
That sounds like what we're tentatively planning. I've got some voice classes in London at the end of June. So we're assuming everything is safe to travel and in your country again, that either before that in later June or after that in early July, that hop up to Birmingham and teach a 2-day class for soft tissue therapists, sports therapists, for who I really am at heart. So it'd be fun to kind of touch base with some of you there.
That'd be great. No, I definitely, if we're open to being able to do that, I'd definitely love to come up. That's great.
That particular class is not on the website. We've got some work to do before we get that up there. But once it comes, we'll hopefully get the word out. So.
Okay, fantastic. I don't think normally I send you down to the lobby and then I announce something for next week, but I haven't really got anything planned for next week. So I think I'm not going to send you anywhere. I think what I'll say is goodbye to anybody out there. If you've got any comments or you want to get in contact with Walt, what's the best? Are you on social media much, Walt? Where do you?
Just reach out to me on whether it's Facebook. I'm not so much on Twitter, but Instagram, Facebook. I do have an account on Twitter if you need to, or just send me an email from the website. The fastest way to get me on the website is waltfritz.com. That gets you there fast, and just click the contact me button. And I love to engage. I love what I do. I love being challenged. I love learning new stuff, and I love talking to you. So reach out and let's talk.
And I think across social media, you're quite handily. You are generally Walt Fritz PT, aren't you?
Yeah.
All the platforms, brilliant. It's not like you change. Some people just change depending on whether you're on Instagram. So we can always find you as Walt Fritz PT.
And Matt, thanks for having me. I really appreciate the
Oh,
opportunity.
I appreciate your time, mate. It's been really nice, and I'm sure there'll be some great feedback. We've had lots of people in. So I wish everybody out there to make the best. I will say Happy New Year, because you got to be positive. It will be a Happy New Year. We will get over this and all this stuff soon, especially with some lovely people like you there. So Walt, I wish you all the best for Happy New Year.
Thanks,
everybody out there. And we'll be back, or I will be back with somebody else on Tuesday week at the normal time of 8 p.m. If you're listening to the podcast or YouTube, then do try and join us live if you can. We'll be here 8 o'clock as always on the Sports Therapy Association Facebook page, and you don't have to be an STA member. All right, thanks people, and thanks again once again to Walt.
Thanks.